Okay, we are live with Ms. Patrician McCarthy. Thank you so very much for taking the time today. Things are getting busy for you. That's what you said as we were getting ready for this chat. And so, I gotta say, I thank you and honor you for making the time to be able to chat with me and thus enlighten others about this amazing thing called Mien Shiang or Chinese face reading. How in the world did you get into this? As you can see, although if on the podcast you're probably not able to see Patrician, but I don't believe she's of Chinese heritage. So how in the world did you get into this kind of work?
Well, that's an interesting thing. Maybe right now, in this day and age, 2018, almost 19, it wouldn't be so unusual to have someone who's not Chinese doing what I do, because I've been teaching this for 25 years or so in the United States and Europe and South America. But then when I first started many, many years ago, it was very, very unusual. It's face reading, Mien Shiang face analysis it's a tool of Chinese medicine. So it's simply one practice that healers, acupuncturists or doctors of Chinese medicine incorporate in their practices. And in China, excuse me, families pass down information from father to oldest son, who's going to follow in his footsteps. And all of these medicines are very similar, but they're all a little different because it's that lineage, and it depends on which part of China, rural China or urban China that they were in. So it's a little different. So you're going to find anyone who's still, coming from that lineage medicine, going to do something a little different and maybe not share the information as much, because that's what their family does and that's what makes them so special. The reason I got into this is I met a gentleman many, many years ago. I wasn't looking for this. I was looking to write a book that took place in Tucson, Arizona, where I had just moved with my husband, and he was going to do an internship in medicine, Western medicine. And we ended up in this very odd place, this desert coming from New York City. And I was fascinated by the area, and I became fascinated by the ideas that there had been a lot of Chinese immigrants in the area at the end of the 1800s because of the railroads. And then, they were all over the pockets of the United States, were left there after the railroads were built. So there was a community here in Tucson, and I was interested in that time period. And I happened to meet the great uncle of one of the families here, and he started sharing some of the information with me. And mainly because I would take him out for rides out in the desert, and he didn't know anyone. He didn't have children. He came to live from Taiwan and came to live here. So he just started teaching me things, basically geomancy, which I'd never heard of before, and what we now call feng shui. Yes, but nobody had heard it. This was in the 70s. And I didn't know anyone. I had to go back to New York and go to the New York City Library to find this much information about it. So Mr. Ping started telling me about this, and then he started telling me things about myself by pointing to my face and everything. And it just was so odd. But the fact is, what happened at that time is so many of the people, the Chinese people who lived in the United States at that time, who were immigrants, very first generation, and who had practiced medicine in China, their children were interested in following in their footsteps. They were going to Western schools, and they wanted to go to Western universities. And I just came along at the right time when I wanted to learn, because I was so fascinated by Mr. Ping. And I think the only reason I used to tease him that he even told me is because he knew I would never do anything about it. I didn't have a family backing behind me, and I was a woman. And it simply wasn't, and nobody in this country would be interested. So he then sent me to some teachers in New York, because he got very lonely after a couple of years to Taiwan. And I started teaching, learning with them. And it was the same thing. It was the same thing, but we'll teach you because our children don't want to learn. But we know you'll never do anything with it, so we don't have to worry. So I stayed in apprentice mode for several years, just learning and not really sure what I would do. And then I was invited to teach in Chinatown in Los Angeles, where I had moved. And then I was invited to teach at Yosan University. And it just became more accepted that even though I wasn't Chinese from a family who had been doing this for 2,000 or 3,000 years, that I knew what I was doing and I knew my subject well, and I started teaching and practicing. But it took a long time. I was an apprentice for a very long time, which is a wonderful way to learn.
It's not really the way that we go about it here in, I guess, in the West for the most part anymore. There's not that long-term association between the teacher and the student anymore. It's all very much many students to one teacher, and you're running through as much. So I'm sure you were probably pretty close to Mr. Ping.
I was. He was. It was an unusual relationship. I was a very young woman in my early 20s, and he was, an older gentleman, and neither of us spoke the other's language very well, but enough that we could communicate. And he was just very lovely and very charming, and I was hooked. I saw how smart he was, and I couldn't figure out how he did those things. And it was not easy. Part of my apprenticeship took a long time because of language barriers too. It was, but what a wonderful way to learn. The patience of the teacher and the patience of the student. I mean, my students don't have that same patience anymore. They're most of them, are from a Western culture, and they go, yes, but how do you do this? Show us how. We want to know how to go. Well, we'll get to that, but we'll get to it probably in a semester or two. That took me quite a bit longer. So they both have their advantages.
With the Get Foxy show, we talk holistic health, natural beauty, and passionate living. And I really feel like this sort of work encompasses a fair amount of that. And especially in the natural beauty side of things, when you're looking at someone's face, what exactly are you looking for, and how do you determine their personality just by facial features?
Well, it's interesting because I'll do a little back step for a second. Chinese medicine is based on mind, body, and spirit, right? So
yes.
In a lot of Western practices, you're going to look at the mind and the emotions from psychology, right? And physical medicine is going to be by your MD, being diagnosed by your MD and prescribed, and so on and so forth. Your spiritual well-being to a religious or spiritual teacher, perhaps. So in Chinese medicine, they don't differentiate. So when I look at someone's face, I'm looking at the balance of the mind, body, spirit. And it's, I remember when I first heard it, it sounds a little woo-woo to a lot of people when they first hear it. But when you get used to the idea and you accept that if you're out of balance in your emotions, it's going to affect your physical health. And if we all live long enough, we know that that's happened. When we're run down, we're tired, we're spiritually, exhausted, from a big event or just a lot of smaller events. Sometimes people this time of year, all the little things will just wear them down. You know that your body is going to be susceptible to illnesses. And vice versa. Very few people have physical ailments and are not emotionally affected or even spiritually tried. So we know it, but we aren't used to thinking about that. So when I talk about looking at someone's face to determine personality, I'm also determining the state of their overall health. And there's no such thing as looking at someone's face to tell them how their physical health is without bringing in the emotional and the mental challenges or sometimes the gifts that come to them and how we receive them or don't receive them, and also the spiritual well-being. So I can determine, when you say, what do I look at in the face? I'm looking at all three of those things. Okay, and without consciously saying, let me look at the mind, let me look at the body, and so on. It's all one. And that's a thing that some of my students have a hard time beginning to look at, and then suddenly they're just doing it. You know, it becomes natural. Anything that's different might take a little bit of time. So what I look for in the face is general balance. Does the face, what are the emotions that show on the face? If I'm looking at someone's face and I say, well, they have fabulous skin and it's taut, and but there's an incredible amount of tension coming through in the eyes and the jaws and other places. And I know a lot, you know, and it's not necessarily that they've had plastic surgery. You know, they might just have the gift of having nice taut skin. But it's, you know, one will give a hint to the other. So I'm looking in general at that energy. Like we said, what do I naturally see of the balance? But I actually look at the size and shape of every single feature. Every single feature tells us something about the health of the person and the personality, which is part of the health, how our health manifests itself. And I mean, I start out very broadly. Even the shape of someone's face can tell us something about them. And so it can get very minute, all the colors that change on the face when you're talking to someone, and you can see, you know, oh my goodness, well, not you, but I can see, I was talking to somebody the other day, and as I'm, you know, talking to her, we're having a Skype reading, suddenly her upper lip got very, very white when we were talking about something. And I, you know, let her finish what she was saying, but say, I want to bring you back to this because your upper lip just got white, and white means frozen. And this particular area, and we're talking about, was her creativity. And she just sort of was glossing over it. But I thought, no, that's a big hint. And it's funny, that same area on the lip also tells about fertility. So it's kind of interesting is that fertility and creativity, we look at the same places on the face, but it's not that unusual when you think about it. So I was able to bring her back to her creativity if she felt that was frozen. She happened to be an artist, a graphic artist in a very big you know, company. And, you know, sure enough, that had a lot to do with why she wasn't feeling well. She wasn't creating in the way that she needed to, and she felt that she had to just cut that off and stifle it. You know, so just that one little thing could tell me a lot about what's going on with her. Now, it would be a little harder with that mustache, but
Yeah.
there are all different ways that we can look.
Well, that is fascinating, just in the fact that there's such a mind-body connection, and that's not something that we're used to in our culture. And this is very similar to some of the ideas that I've been reading from. There's a gal in California by the name of Dr. Zanna Hackett, who has a personality assessment called the Ultimate Life Tool, and it's based in physiometrics. Or that's what she calls it, physiometrics. Okay. But it's the same idea in Chinese medicine, that our bodies manifest in a specific way. And for us, you know, it relates to the 5 elements. And those elements then give us insights about various things going on with the person's mind, body, and spirit. And so we show up in this world in these bodies that, you know, can kind of be related to vehicles almost. Some of us show up as Lamborghinis. Some of us show up as pickup trucks. You know, some of us are just built stockier, and we're not meant to be running races. We're meant for that long haul. Whereas others are leaner, sleeker. They're meant for that race. And we all have this natural way that we are built. And I find it fascinating that we can look at the face and be able to read into that. It's really fascinating stuff.
It is. And I'm glad you brought up at this point too the five elements, because your audience may or may not know from some of the podcasts that you do and what you do. You're an acupuncturist, and you deal with the five elements in your diagnosis and the way you look at people, and you observe them and how you come to your different diagnoses, whether it's mind, body, and spirit. So maybe I'll just review for the people we're talking to the five elements. So what I'm looking for when I'm reading the face, right? I'm just not looking to see how's your creativity doing, how are your lungs doing, what's the balance between what you take in and give out by looking at your eyes, the energy and the qi and the shen there. All those things I'm looking at, but those are all very separate type of things, and organs or emotions. What I'm really doing in certain way is trying to determine which element or that particular person is most dominant in and which element they're deficient in, because that's going to tell me a lot. That's what's going to tell you a lot as an acupuncturist in your work. So to define it for your audience is we look at people determine if they're wood element, fire element, earth element, metal element, or water element personality. And each one of those elements that have been broken down have a specific personality traits associated with them. They also have specific organs. So when I teach medical people, I don't teach them about the wood personality, I teach them about the liver personality. And when I talk about fire, we're talking about the heart personality. Earth, the spleen and stomach, metal, the lung personality, and water, the kidney personality. But I found out very quickly, nobody wanted to hear, you're a spleen personality or you're a liver. So going back to what those, ancient Taoists, they were very smart when they used the metaphors. So it's much easier to hear you're a wood personality or you're a fire personality than bringing those organs into it. But what we do know is that those organs are associated and that there are emotions associated with each of those organs in Chinese medicine. So if I look at someone and I see they have a lot of wood features, I look at someone and I say, oh, those eyebrows, very dominant, bushy maybe, or long and bringing a lot of energy. Ooh, and they have brow bones. And so I say, oh, there's a lot of wood energy. So I already know that because the wood element, the emotion associated with wood is anger. I know right away when I see that person, when I see dominant wood features on their face, that one of their challenges, and yes, gifts, is anger. And that doesn't mean they walk around angry and that they're, always in a rage. But when a stressful situation happens, their immediate feeling, that immediate emotion is anger. I don't know how they deal with it, because I haven't known them their whole life. That may be true. They may have worked on that a lot and used that anger for something that really benefits them. But it's probably a challenge, right? And so I always like to remind people that the other side of anger, same side, same coin, two sides, you can't have one without the other, is passion for life. So when I work with that person who has the dominant wood, I try and help them get in touch with passion, their passion for life, and using the anger in ways maybe to be protective, but not to motivate themselves. A lot of people, I'm sure you run into this all the time, people who have a lot of wood, when you say, well, what do you use that anger for? What's it good for? And they'll talk about, well, it motivates me. I go, well, one of my things of my job is to help them say, maybe you could use the passion to motivate yourself and look at things in a different way. And as long as we're talking about wood, I'll just very briefly mention the emotions associated with fire. And so I'm looking to see how much fire a person has in their face. If I see a lot of fire, which are a lot of points in the face, red complexions, no matter what the race or ethnicity, there's a reddishness. just like I said, those points, all the energy goes up, little points in the top of the eyebrow, the lips, the nose very often, even the top of the ears, a lot of fire. So I know that that person's emotion associated with it is joy. And everyone says, I want to be fire because they have the one emotion that's joy. Unfortunately, in our Western world, it got mistranslated. It means overjoy sometimes. You know, what other people might say manicky, or that what we call the scattered emotions. So it's lots of heart energy, lots of joy, but it comes out like this a lot, and they can't pull it in easily, right? So I try and work with them a lot of time with the joy, with the love. The other side of the overjoy is really being able to connect with the heart and just how to pull that energy in. You know, and what I might find on their face, or some other traits to go on in our circle, some earth traits, right? So the earth traits I'm going to find in the face, kind of fleshy. You could be 20 pounds underweight and you're still going to have certain fleshy areas if you're earth. The end of the tip of the nose, the earlobes, the chin, very often that area right under the eyes. It's just, there's a little bit more fleshiness, just like there is on the rest of the body. And those people worry. The association is worried. When they're under stress, the first thing that's going to happen to them is they're going to go into that state of worry. And it's hard to bring that in, just like it's hard to bring the scattered fiery emotions in. Sometimes it's hard to stop that whirling, you know, that whirlpool of worry. And to stop that, and I try and remind them the other side of their worry is a great sympathy. And, you know, nobody gives a hug, nobody can listen to your problems like an earth person. They're grounded, they're caring, they're nurturing. And what I try and do is help them do the same for themselves. Because earth people are really good at giving that up, really, really not so good at asking for it.
That is true. I've seen that a lot in my patients.
You see that, you know, and we always say to the earth people, you know, one of the things I can tell by looking at your face is you have a hard time digesting your food, your emotions, and your thoughts. And they're all related, right? And we look at it in the same area. In this area, if I see a lot of yellow on that, I know it's digestion. I might not know right away what they're having a hard time digesting, probably all three if they're earth, you know, that type of thing. So, you know, I help them, hopefully, you know, to be sympathetic and to ask for themselves. So metal people, I look at them and I can tell that they're metal very often, just the opposite of the earth person. Like I said, they could be 20 or 40 pounds underweight and they're still going to have the flesh. A metal person could be 20 or 40 pounds overweight, but they tend not to be, because they eat very sparingly. But if they are, there's hardly any padding on their face. Very taut skin, high cheekbones, high eyebrows, very much what we used to say, like the country club look. A very elegant, a very proper appearance. And appearance is very important to metal people. And they really do believe, as they look, they do behave, that there is a place for everything and everything in its place, including emotions and behavior. Okay, so these are people who, when they're under stress, their main emotion is grief. And that's a hard one to explain too. It's not that they're going around like that, you know, I must take to my, you know, to my fainting couch because I'm in a state of grief. A student explained it to me several years ago, about 20 years ago, in a way that I felt I could help teach. And I said, will you explain to me and the rest of the class what, because you nod very much and you understand what I say about the meaning of grief. And he said, I feel like when I was born, I came into this world missing something. And that's it. It's that kind of grief. You can't explain it. You don't know what it is, but it's just that. And I go here, like the lungs, which is, you know, the organs associated with metal, that sort of emptiness, that coolness that breathes. And so when they're under stress, they go to that vulnerable place. a little bit of the emptiness. And so therefore, a lot of people think metal people, they are cool and aloof, but they're not cold and uncaring. They're very, very caring. They don't show it. And sometimes they don't experience it. Remember we talked about that white area, that frozen? That's a metal type of thing where we say cutting off the feelings or cutting off behavior. So yeah, the last that we look for, looking for personality type, is the water. So if I look at someone and I say, in some ways they don't have a defined shape of their face, these lower cheeks right here are full, they have dreamy eyes, usually big eyes, and sort of very slow, seductive movements, behaviors, the way they look at you, the way they turn their face, you know, they're just, whole man is very, you know that they're looking and thinking and studious. And those, and lots of blue tones on their face, nice, good, determined jaws. And that person, I know right away if they have a lot of water features, that their first emotion they go to when they're under stress is fear. It just doesn't mean they're going to be paralyzed with fear, because again, like I said, when we referred to the liver, or the wood personality, we know it's going to be anger. We just don't know how long they're staying in it. Okay, so they could be paralyzed by fear, or they have learned to work through it. But it's probably most people who have water, it's going to be a challenge their whole life. So again, like I want to remind them, the other side of their coin of fear is wisdom. And where does that come from? That fear of, what if this happens? What if I run into traffic? Well, you think about it and you come up with some good answers very often, right? And it makes you wise. And so my job and your job with your patients and clients is to help them get to the point of using the wisdom that they've garnered and using what they thought of as their challenges as their gifts. So
that is information that I believe can be found in your books, correct? You're an author of multiple books.
yes.
And this is pretty much summed up in the Face Reader, correct?
It's a lot of it. The Face Reader is really, sometimes I think, as one of my students said the other day, I said, you know, that's an intense book. I wasn't signing up for all that information. But he said basically he wanted what I just told you, you know, and, you know, so you can go in, I think there are like 47 different things that you can tell from the nose. And, you know, if you're really going to be a practitioner, that's a good book for it. And it gives you that overall. So yes, you can learn a lot from the Face Reader, probably more than a lot of people want to know. And I find a lot of people read, the people who are not practitioners, right? But the people who want it for self-help, they read in general, they want to know a lot of it, you know, what's my nose say about me, what do my eyes and my eyebrows say, but they're really fascinated by the personality. So I just wrote a book, which will be out in a few weeks, where I concentrate on the personality. I don't tell you what your nose says, because that book's already out there. If you want to know everything about the nose and the chin and how, what every single tiny little line means, that's, the Face Reader is a good book. If you really want to know about the personality and the behaviors of the 5 elements, that's the book I just wrote. It's called In Your Element, Taoist Psychology. And even though Taoist Psychology is part of the title, because that's what it is, it's behavior, you know, we're looking at the 5 behavioral group types. I made it fun and accessible for anyone who's interested in learning about their personality. I talk about, I'll do it in each section. So in the wood, I talk about what food do they like, what movies do they like, what books do they like, what architecture do they like, what do their homes look like, where are they most comfortable. I think there are 25 different categories for each of the 5. And it's, you know, it's fun, it's informative. I use a lot of anecdotes about different, you know, people and situations and how they either thrive or don't thrive in certain environments, and what you can do to make yourself more comfortable and what you can do to those who you love, care about, work with, and realize how different we all are. Because you know what happens all the time. I think you and I were talking before. I do a lot of corporate work, and I go into corporations, and the big problem I have with the teams is the team leaders generally are trying to make everyone on the team behave and think like they do and execute their work. And when I point out the different personalities, and for example, we talked about digesting for Earth personality. Okay, let's say an Earth personality is on your team and you've got a lot of wood, which you do, and you know that. Okay, and so you're goal oriented, you're focused, you want to get things done, and you've got that Earth person who is not goal oriented, focused, and wants to get things done immediately. They need to digest the information. They literally need to feel how it feels. Completely opposite ways of doing work. One is not more valuable than the other, but they each feel that there is. And so it's my job to go in and say how each of these people work. The fire person has to have some kind of fun. The earth person needs to digest. The metal person has to be very clear. They don't want all those details, just what pertains to that project. And the water person needs to dream about it, needs to decide, let me go on this tributary, let me see what this is, all the what ifs, and then come to a great conclusion. And you can do everything in your with all your talents to make everyone to be like you, but that's not going to happen, right? So I love to work with these teams when they go, oh, this person is not fighting me by not being like me. They're being them. And so introducing that we are so intrinsically different. And each of our challenges and each of our gifts are really valuable, but we can make them work with each other. We just have to learn. I'm sorry?
You bet.
Yeah. But it's not so easy, right? For people to think it, it's not just in corporate, it's in families.
Yes. This is definitely something that would apply to your work relationships, your family relationships, even your own interpersonal relationship with yourself.
Yes.
And learning, okay, well, yeah, I've got these elements that are primarily within my constitution. And so, yeah, if I learn more about the wood element and, oh my goodness, I'm also fire element aspected, and how do those play with one another, and how can I support the wood and the fire in my personality instead of stifling it? You can learn so much about yourself, and that is where you can really start getting into what I want this show to be, helping you cultivate that unique personal power that you have, that I call your inner fox, but it's just that it's that unique personal power that you were born with, that you go, yeah, okay, yes, I know myself, I'm confident in myself, and I'm able to go out there and do the things that are best for me. And so this is great information for people to have. So thank you so much for putting that out there. I need to ask you the big question, because this is the Get Foxy show.
Yes.
So, Patrician, what does Foxy and being Foxy mean to you?
Well, I'm old, so I come from a time where being foxy was not such a good thing, right? It was sort of like just being physically attractive, but maybe sly and vixenish and so on and so forth. But you and I talking and corresponding in the last, I think, well, I certainly know that's not Terry's version of it. So I'm going to ask you afterwards too, because I'm curious. But what it means, so I started thinking about, well, I know what it doesn't mean, and what does it mean? And so I thought, all right, if we're talking, we looked up the definition of foxy and thought during that, whether it's 60s, 70s, and, that vixen-like and very physically attractive person, and that sly type of thing, people getting what they need or want. Really, being Foxy to me now is beautiful of mind, body, spirit. And you were saying too that natural beauty. You know, it's I was talking to one of my classes a couple of weeks ago and saying I had just agreed to the date to come on and do this, and we were talking about what Foxy is and so on, and what beauty is, and external and internal beauty. And this fella said, "Do you know who Jimmy Durante is?" And I said, "Actually, I do." Now, Jimmy Durante was an entertainer in our grandparents' or great-grandparents' times. I mean, it was really a long, long time ago. He was not a pretty boy. It's
No,
not right.
he had a very large nose, if I remember right.
Yes, and just, and like he said, my grandmother was so in love with Jimmy Durante. And he said, and then my mother found out who he was. And he said, I looked at those pictures and I said something like, well, he's odd looking, or he's not handsome, or something like that. And he said both his mother and grandmother turned to him and he said, it's an inner beauty and it shines out. And, so we ended up with the whole class talking about inner and outer beauty. And it's so true. We've all known people who have that outer beauty who we're not drawn to at all because of their inner, maybe anger or misplaced anger or jealousy or whatever. And so that Foxy to me means someone who has the confidence, or is learning, or wants to learn to have the confidence of who they are, to be beautiful, and in using that inner beauty that we know is always going to glow outside. If you have that inner beauty, it's going to show one way or the other, and people are going to pick it up. And I think the foxiest people that we probably know are those who are comfortable with who they are. And those people are kind and generous and gracious and giving. And that's the kind of foxy beauty, I think, that shows. Also, there's something when I think about that fox, there's a little shyness, right? So maybe to me, the kind of foxy beauty that's out there is the kind of person who just feels confident enough in loving themselves that they don't need to be loved by everyone else, just those who matter, and that they probably want to matter too. So that's what I think about Foxy.
I think that is fantastic, Patrician. Where can people find out more about you and your books?
Okay. Well, probably my website right now, and I'm going to put all that information on within a week or two, because then we'll know the publishing date for the note. So it's www.mienshiang.com.
And I will have all that on the show notes too. That way, learning to spell Mien Shiang is a little difficult. So you can just go to the getfoxyshow.com and we'll have it right there in the show notes for you as well.
Right. Thank you for that plug. I want to tell you one more book that will probably be out in the summer or the fall, because it ties in. You and I can talk about that a little bit. I'll send you some galleys. When we talk about natural beauty, it's called Putting Your Best Face Forward, and how to change the way your features look and your face looks without plastic surgery, without injecting Botox, without doing anything, but maybe a little makeup, maybe the way you wear your hat, maybe the way you wear your facial hair or your hair. And if you want to emphasize certain features in business or maybe in love, it's a good guide and a fun way of learning how to do that and bringing energy and good chi to your face without resorting to something that in the long run is going to hurt you.
And this is something you wrote?
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, we will definitely need to have the link to that as well.
Yes, I'll send it to you. I think you'll be interested in it.
Excellent. Well, Patrician, we are pretty much out of time. I would love to have you on again to chat more, because this was, you made my job so easy today.
My assistant, Michelle, who you've talked to, just don't start interviewing him. Because I'm always so curious. So I think I did pretty good. I let you interview me.
I sure appreciate it. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. And I will look forward to chatting with you again sometime in the future.
Me too. Thank you very much, Terry. Bye-bye. How do we get out of this?